Coming up next on the forum, I'll be having a conversation with Robin Hickman about her efforts to memorialize Gordon Parks. That's coming up next on the forum. Good afternoon and welcome to SPNN's Forum. I'm your host, Sanni, and sitting with me today is Robin Hickman. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for sitting in that seat. I'm overjoyed to meet you and to just be in this space with you and share with you. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I'm gonna cut to the chase.
Let's cut to the chase.
You are Gordon Parks, the famous photographer, and I'm more familiar with his work in photography, just doing my research. I had no idea he was connected to Shaft or Essence magazine, but you are his relative. You are his niece?
I am his great niece.
His great niece, okay.
And I'm his sister Lillian's granddaughter.
Okay.
So that's always important, but a part of the Parks family learning tree. And so that's great because I had an opportunity to walk very closely with my uncle. So
that's awesome.
Yes,
for lack of a better word, that's awesome. Just doing the research about his work because I hear the name all the time. There's a school in the Twin Cities. Is it a high school or it's a
high school?
It's a high school, and I've heard the name. I'm from Chicago, so I've heard the name consistently, Gordon Parks, but I never really knew the history behind what he's done. But before we get into all of that, I want to know a little bit more about you and your journey to doing this project for trying to make sure that we remember his work, his life work.
Well, I think one of the things that my parents taught us, our family understood was important, my village, godmothers and godfathers and elders taught us to build institutions, and that's very important as a people, that our destiny depends on our ability to build and maintain institutions. So my institution is SoulTouch Productions, in which I'm the CEO and an executive producer of SoulTouch. And at SoulTouch, we create meaningful media. So we have media production, but we also create powerful social impact experiences. And so at SoulTouch, and I also do a lot of consulting work with various arts organizations to ensure authentic inclusion of all people. So the social impact work of SoulTouch is just as important as the production work. And two of my social impact initiatives are Loving the Skin I'm In, which for 10 years now has empowered young women of all ethnic backgrounds to love who they are and to advocate for one another's right to be in the world and make contributions. So I'm very proud of Loving the Skin I'm In. And I want to later kind of tie that into Uncle Gordon and his gift to the world. And the other initiative at SoulTouch is In the Footsteps of Gordon Parks, which is a legacy initiative that we brought kind of to life working with other family members to honor Uncle Gordon, but to also honor a promise I made to him, my last visit with him in New York before he died. And again, I walked with him for many years. He was my uncle, but he was also my mentor. He encouraged what I do for a living, but how I do what I do as a media maker. Had opportunity to be a producer on an HBO documentary of his life, which was done before he died. So seldom do people get to see their life story being told. That's usually done when people have passed on. So very, very close. And for years he got to see how I used his life and legacy in the lives of young people. So this particular visit, he looked at me and he said, "Baby, what's going to happen to black boys?" So now he's 93 years old. Renaissance man, revered internationally. And at the end of his life, he was concerned, do black boys have it any better than I did as a young black man, struggling, homeless, fighting racism, poverty on the streets of St. Paul and Minneapolis, Minnesota? So he had that concern, and he asked, well, what did I do? And I said, Uncle Gordon, are you kidding? So that says something about the man, that he was an artist and he was an activist, and until the end wanted to know that his contribution mattered to those who looked like him. Very important. And I made the promise to him. I said, Uncle Gordon, you know, you got family. We're going to keep it alive. We're going to keep your legacy alive. Your living will not be in vain. So that's what all this work is about. And I think it's important, too, for people who walk closely with our legends to be in the mix of ensuring that their living is not in vain. So that's what all of the work is about. In the footsteps of Gordon Parks is a grander vision. A part of it is reviving some of the work with young black men through a Choice of Weapons Institute, which is titled after his autobiography, A Choice of Weapons, which chronicles his life here in St. Paul and Minneapolis in his early years. It will incorporate celebrations of his life, for which we've done for his centennial celebration. We celebrated him at the History Center. We had a film festival which featured Shaft, and Richard Roundtree was here. Shaft himself was here, and all that is wonderful. We'll keep doing those things, but we're very excited to have an amazing partnership around ensuring that there's a Gordon Parks Memorial in downtown St. Paul. So we're excited about that.
When you say institution, what do you mean? Do you mean a school? Do you mean a scholarship? When you say institution for young people who are interested in...
For young people, well, SoulTouch is an institution, and that is my business, that is my organization, that is my place in which I do my work. I think that we have to formally create places and spaces for us to embrace one another, teach one another, impart wisdom to one another, our young people. So be it like the institution of a church or a financial institution, so the spirit of institution building, something that is going to be very vital and relevant.
And
so that's
the
institution. So institutionalizing, I think, the legacy of Gordon Parks, that's happening all over the country. Amazing things are being done. You're from Chicago. George Lucas and Melody Hobson, George Lucas of Star Wars and his amazing wife, Melody Hobson, who's a financial genius and leader. They just granted $25 million to the University of Chicago for a new Gordon Parks Media Arts Center.
Wow.
So there are institutions and spaces all over the country. But this is where Uncle Gordon chose his weapon, the camera. He often talked about, to young people, shooting a camera has proven to be more powerful than shooting a gun. In times such as this, we need that message to get to young people. And so we want to create a memorial that is not just a stagnant, structure, but a movement that will engage young people and people to understand the philosophy and vision and just the gift of Gordon Parks. So the movement will be, again, what I like to see, I want to see his likeness in the form of a statue and other pieces that will lift up his work and his walk.
I want to ask you this before I forget.
Yes, please do.
It's crazy to hear his choice of weapons and how he used photography to really change the game, and that was his approach to shedding light on what was happening in his time. And it's crazy to me to see that young people are actually living in the spirit of Gordon Parks by taking film of injustices being done. But I'm glad that you are doing these projects, because I don't know that they're necessarily making the connection that they're doing that.
They're not making and I think it's important to you. I have done youth media most of my life. Again, just sitting here and seeing you in that seat, and you're just, the light on you and your wisdom, your consciousness is so refreshing to me. Because that's what I've dedicated my career to, ensuring that all young people and young people who look like me and you and Gordon Parks take their rightful place in media making. Very important. But my work I have to connect the dots with these young people. I have to work with young people doing the soul work with them so that they develop this and this.
Right.
So they create conscious content. See, young people have all the tools and they're creating content. But and media pieces, but it's not always conscious content. It's not always serving us in the spirit of Gordon Parks. We talked a little earlier about, we talked about Essence Magazine, for instance. You know, a lot of people didn't know he was one of the co-founders of Essence magazine.
I didn't know that.
Yes, he was the first black photographer at Life magazine and at Vogue magazine, but he was a co-creator of Essence magazine. I am strong, partially as a black woman, partially due because I was a child and could look at the beautiful, powerful images
that he was
of
capturing.
Women in Essence, even though he didn't take all of those photographs.
He still had something to do with
those
it.
that he did,
Right.
that reflected us in our beauty. That's everlasting. That's powerful impact. He gave us visions of possibilities for us. So when we have now in 2014, the recent current fresh controversy is that of the amazing Chandra, executive producer and creator Chandra Rhimes, making history this week with 3 shows on a network.
Right, right.
You know, premiering on
Right.
Thursday. But she is depicted in an article
As an angry
black woman. And the article goes on to allude to Viola Davis being an older actress who was cast and dark-skinned and not as beautiful, are not aligned with the classic standard of beauty that Kerry Washington and Halle Berry represents. That's in 2014. And so then when we know that a Gordon Parks and others presented images to remind us that we're all beautiful. Viola Davis in her rebuttal lifted up Maya Angelou's words, "Still I rise." In spite of the lies, still I rise. And so this is a time, I think, that for so many reasons, beyond him being a beloved great uncle, that I take my rightful place and our family takes its rightful place, and others who respect and honor the man, where we stand and connect the dots of his legacy with the lives of our young people. And that work it will go beyond. With Loving the Skin I'm In, it started 10 years ago with little black girls in my neighborhood. And it is now touching girls of all ethnic backgrounds. Why is that important to me? Because we have to understand one another, respect one another, so we can be allies with one another. And that's another thing Uncle Gordon did masterfully. He did it in a way where, for his time, very courageous. Because when we have the courage to present our greatness and our abilities, our skills, our wisdom, people who are righteous can't do anything other than respect that and ally with us. And I'm walking in that spirit, and that's Uncle Gordon, but that's always also the Parks legacy, my aunts and uncles, my grandmother, my father, my mother, Patricia Fraser Hickman. They poured Village, Katie McGuad, Mahmoud Al-Kati, the Village when we were strong. We have lived the answers we're seeking. We just have to Sankofa, reclaim that which has been lost, and we can do that. So this Gordon Parks Memorial Movement is doing that. I'm honored to partner with Forecast Public Arts, Jack Becker, on this project. It's important there that this partnership be a model too for others. Let's come together. Let's respect one another's what we bring. Let's partner up and let's do the work. So there's just so many pieces to this, but I'm so excited. We have so much support for this movement at City Hall, throughout the city, the funding community. And this will be a great thing that I'm claiming we will see in downtown St. Paul. It represents Uncle Gordon in the footsteps, his own footsteps, returning to his rightful place in downtown St. Paul. It's important for everyone to be able to heal by experiencing the Gordon Parks Memorial and give input. We're excited. We have, throughout the summer, have been doing surveys at community events. We were at Rondo Days, and we had a booth where people could come and give their visions for what a Gordon Parks Memorial should be. And we had an actor who walked around as Gordon Parks all day, and it was just glorious. So we'll have fun, but when a young man from Rondo who filled out the survey, a young black man who filled out the survey, sees the actual memorial, he can say, hey, I had something to do with it, right? We're creating a sense of ownership.
You're watching SPNN's Forum. I'm your host, Sanni, and sitting with me today, if you're just tuning in, is Robin Hickman, and we're getting into a deep discussion,
Yes,
an informative discussion about your efforts and the city's efforts and the country's efforts, what it looks like, to memorialize the works of Gordon Parks and just his impact altogether. I know that you have SoulTouch Productions and all the beautiful things that that's doing. I'm glad for any organization or institution, as you put it, that is starting to tell women, look, love who you are, just the way you are. Because I'm starting, as a woman, I'm starting to internalize those things and not seeking out without and looking more so within. But my question is, and I think this is really important, what are the efforts outside of, well, you just said that when you go to Rondo Days and you go to these community events and young men are coming and filling out or giving their opinion on what they think a Gordon Parks monument or something or some type of ode to him would look like. Are there any other efforts to rally in young men in these efforts to because I hear a lot of, I'm greedy, so I hear a lot of good things about how you're helping women. But is there anything specifically going on for young men? Because I hear so much today that there's no black man to look up to. I keep hearing that, but when I hear about what Gordon Parks has done, and I want to hear that. I want to hear his story more often. Right. How are you connecting the two?
I am, and you know what? And I thank you for asking that question. That's why I have to repeat. And this is not ego or anything like that. Our mother raised us to be humble, but to know our worth. I'm very clear about my worth and taking my rightful place in my family's legacy because it's not new. And Uncle Gordon, when he posed the question to me about what's going to happen to black boys, he had to put it in an atmosphere knowing, I could look in his eyes, that he knew my response would put him at ease because he knew all of the years that I infused his life in the lives of young people, young black men at Red Wing Correctional Facility when I was invited to come and speak at graduations, and the superintendent at the time, Otis Zanders, would keep having me coming so that I can infuse Uncle Gordon into these young men. And as a result of that, I had a teacher who said, tell your uncle. One of my students said he learned how to read reading A Choice of Weapons. Brothers would say, tell your uncle, that's the only book I've ever read. Taking letters from those brothers and taking them to New York to Uncle Gordon, and then seeing him weep as he would read the letters. Starting a Choice of Weapons Institute at Red Wing where we had choice fellows who would communicate with Uncle Gordon, and Uncle Gordon autographed copies of the books for the choice fellows. How did we, I remember, I'm just getting, when I reflect on all these things and knowing that brought him joy. That's why he knew he can pose the question to me. But I had a group of special ed students at Obama Elementary School, and we went through an 8-week journey where they learned about Uncle Gordon. And two of the brothers were so fascinated with Uncle Gordon because they read that he was homeless. These two little brothers were living in a homeless shelter. So they got excited, and the one brother, I said, your first assignment, write tell your vision about your life. And he wrote, I have a vision I'll do better in school. Then I can maybe go to college. I'm gonna play in the NBA. But who am I kidding? I'm only gonna live to be 21. This is a 12-year-old little brother. But the course of the 8 weeks and him learning about Uncle Gordon, every other week he proclaimed, I'm gonna do photography like Mr. Parks. Then it was like, I can write poetry like Mr. Parks. Then it was, no, I'm gonna direct a camera like Mr. Parks.
So every week it was something higher.
Every week it was something higher. But at the end of the school year, he said he believed he could be 92 like Mr. Parks. I know what I'm doing here. I know it, I have seen it, I have been blessed to see the transformation. So it has to be more than a structure. It has been more than a structure. To see the tears in Richard Roundtree Shaft's eyes as he spoke in an interview about staying in the hotel that Gordon Parks once worked in, seeing the house that Gordon Parks was thrown out of into homelessness, being at the high school named after Gordon Parks and seeing young black men playing the piano. When I go to the Gordon Parks gala each year and seeing the people who we all revere, who revere him and honor him, I met Swiss Beats. He was an awardee one year. The year after, Alicia Keys got the Gordon Parks Award. Her husband got the award. And we met and talked, and he was very pleasant. And he circled back to me. And he said, "Sister, what would your uncle feel about me getting his award?" And I told him about Uncle Gordon's concerns for black boys. And Brother Swiss said, "Hey, I got the little brothers covered." I said, "Then he would be pleased. We can do this." And I want to see people celebrate Uncle Gordon and engage in his legacy all over the world. But we also have to create something here where people come and walk in his footsteps. An amazing Gordon Parks Museum in his hometown, Fort Scott, Kansas. It's incredible to be there. But he chose his weapon, the camera, and music here.
Why did he choose it here?
His family, our great-grandmother was sick. Her wishes, and before she died, was that him and then the younger siblings come to Minnesota. Some of our relatives were here, so he came up to Minnesota and hit some circumstances. And so it's not a surprise that he would be concerned at the end of his life about young men who looked like him. Whenever he would come to town, he would hook up with my father, Bobby, and, go up to Stillwater Penitentiary. And he had relationships and connected with brothers up there. That's the side of Uncle Gordon a lot of people don't know. When I sit at these galas in New York, and they nice and everything, right? It's all good, fun, I had fun there, Mayor Coleman was a guest at the gala.
But do they know the man?
But do they know? And when people ask, who knew Gordon Parks in here? And I'm like, I sit there like, not like I did.
Right.
I don't care who you are, because I had the privilege of hearing his concerns and his vision for us to have
the human side,
and for us to have a greater destiny. That's what his photographs were about. He knew the power that these images will last forever. These images of Malcolm and the women in the nation, or the brother in Harlem, and on and on and on, or the hip hop artist. He took the cover photo for XXL's tribute to Hip Hop Nation.
Really?
And they did it, and they staged it like the Great Day in Harlem photograph with all the jazz musicians. They had all the hip hop musicians, and they chose Gordon Parks. I was sitting with him one day when Diddy called, talking about, because he was getting a photograph of Malcolm X. So we have to connect the dots for our young people.
I think young people need to know that.
Yes, they need to know that.
They need to hear that, because I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh, he was so proud of that. He called and told me about getting that assignment.
What do you think are the barriers from young people knowing that? I think with what I'm hearing a lot from Gordon Parks is he's totally tied to a young. Obviously, if that was his last few words, is how are the young black men? Are they better off?
Are they going to make it?
Are they going to make it? And I think what I hear a lot of young people, I work with young people a lot, is sometimes they feel like people don't care. And I think if they can at least see that connection, that he cared. I mean, that hip hop artists are reaching out to him like this, that they respect him. What do you think is the barrier between them?
I have a number. That would be a whole nother show. But when I went to Uncle Gordon to ask his permission for us to begin the journey of doing the documentary of his life, I went, and before I could even pose the question, he told me about someone trying to mug him the day before I arrived. And then he pointed to a stack of letters on his table. He said, "Right, baby, look at those letters. They're letters from young people, and most of them are asking me about violence and telling me about the violence in their lives. What are we going to do?" That was another very pivotal, and I had wonderful times with my uncle, where he'd serenade me, or we'd sit and he'd cook for me, whatever. Glorious stories about my uncle. But that was one time, and the last time, that really got to me. And I said, "Uncle Gordon, that's why it's time to tell your life story. Your life represents a blueprint that we need to transform lives." And he looked at me, he said, "Are you ready?" I said, "You've groomed me well, I'm ready." And 6 years later, there we had it. Half Past Autumn, The Life of Gordon Parks, HBO documentary. Very proud to have been able to be a part of that. And to walk with my uncle to ensure that it be a powerful documentary that we could have to show young people forever. One thing I would like to even just share with you and the viewing audience, one of the things we can do here locally is for folks trying to do things and honoring Uncle Gordon's legacy, don't leave out the people who walked with the man.
Right.
I always love hugging a young man after talking about Uncle Gordon, because I could say, and I got this from Mahmoud El-Kati when he talked about another great legendary person in our history. But I said, you're hugging the woman who hugged the man. When I think about my cousins and uncles and aunts, they're those of us from the Parks Learning Tree that can bring something and helping a young person be inspired to connect the dots. Mm-hmm. But we have to do it. We have to continue to put these visions of possibilities before our young people. Mm-hmm. So I'm very proud and honored. It gets exhausting. But again, I'll go say, it sounds corny, but seeing you here, speaking with me, you were giving me the confidence to articulate what's in my soul. So I thank you for that.
I've been asking about your efforts to reach out to young people. Is there anything right now that young people can do? There's going to be a young person watching this, and this is an image, just you talking about his work, this is an image of the potential of their destiny. Is there anything that young people can do to help out with this?
That I think that, as I tell the young people I work with, I go old school on them, but there's not a young person, young man or woman that I'm working with through whatever initiative. The first time I meet them, I let them know there'll be days I need you more than you need me, and giving them that responsibility. I often lift up Maya Angelou's poem, A Pledge to Rescue Our Youth. In it, she talks about what we must do to ensure the destiny, a powerful destiny for our young people. I read the poem and I conclude it with, but who's going to rescue the rescuers? I believe, if I think back about Don't Believe the Hype and all the powerful, wonderful young medium makers and professionals that came out of that movement back in the 90s, or any of my other work, I believe that if you're a righteous rescuer, those you rescue will rescue you. And that's been my experience. But we have to walk with them and instill in them and nurture that confidence that they do have something to contribute to the world. They should take their rightful place, that they must be humble but know their worth. So as we walk with them and nurture that in them, but I also tell them I can't want righteousness and glory and destiny for you more than you want it for yourself. So as my mother said before she passed, and it was the theme of her home going, we still have so much work to do. But I know firsthand, and I've worked with young people who have had some of the greatest challenges, when they see in your eyes affirmation, they're ready to step up. So we have to do our part and get back to being the village that raises the children. Because I still go old school. Oh, no, you don't call me Robin. I'm Miss Robin.
Miss Robin. Yeah.
And they appreciate it. And they'll step up. They'll step up.
If you give them the challenge, they'll step up.
They'll step up.
Is there anything else you want to leave? Anything else? Any last remarks? I think you hit it all, but
I think so.
Nothing. Is it contact information?
You can go to
a website.
Forecast Public Arts, and I don't have the address, but Forecast Public Arts website to do the survey, learn more about the Gordon Parks Memorial Movement. You can go to www.soultouchproductions.com.
I love that name.
Yes, Soul Touch, and that's my website. I finally, took some time from the work to try to walk with a sister to help me finally have a website. It's still evolving.
It's a living, breathing organism.
You find some things that need to be corrected, let a sister know. But I'm so happy to have that, because then people can learn about the walk and my journey and the work.
Well, thank you, Robin. This has been very informative, Miss Robin.
No. How old are you? No, that's all right. No, it's okay. Robin, no, please.
Thank you so much for coming out.
Thank you so much.
And I know you had nothing to do with this, but thank you for being his great niece, because that gave me something to research. And sometimes I feel like there's such a wide horizon of information about our history, and you just gave me one little piece of juice that at least refreshed me for the next person to find out.
Wow. So thank you so much.
Not a problem. My name's Sanni, and you've been watching SPNN's Forum.